Breaking tonight, Brian Williams has been suspended without pay, effective immediately. Welcome to the Kelly File, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. Fox News learning about NBC's decision concerning Mr. Williams just about 1 hour ago. Williams has been off the air since last week. He took himself off the air after falsely suggesting that a helicopter he was traveling in back in 2003 in Iraq came under fire. It was a story he has been repeating for years, but only caught up to him after veterans who were with him at the time of that event started to publicly speak out. NBC issuing a memo to staffers saying Brian Williams' actions were wrong and completely inappropriate for someone in his position. We have Team Fox coverage tonight. Our Fox News media analyst Bernard Goldberg is here. Fox News senior political analyst Brit Hume is here as well. But we begin tonight with Trace Gallagher on the breaking news. Trace?
Megyn, in the memo, NBC News President Deborah Turnus says the internal investigation is ongoing, but said, quoting here, Brian misrepresented events which occurred while he was covering the Iraq War in 2003. It then became clear that on other occasions, Brian had done the same while telling that story in other venues. Of course, Williams first claimed he saw a chopper in front of him get hit by a rocket-propelled grenade and later claimed his chopper got hit. Both are untrue. The NBC News president went on to say, quoting, in addition, we have concerns about comments that occurred outside NBC News while Brian was talking about his experiences in the field. As managing editor and anchor of nightly news, Brian has a responsibility to be truthful and to uphold the high standards of the news division at all times, adding, quote, this was a very hard decision. We believe this suspension is the appropriate and proportionate action. The memo was written by Deborah Turnus, but she included comments by Steve Burke, the CEO of NBC Universal, who says, quote, by his actions, Brian has jeopardized the trust millions of Americans place in NBC News. His actions are inexcusable, and this suspension is severe and appropriate. But remember, the internal investigation is also looking into other disputed stories, including during Brian Williams' coverage of Hurricane Katrina and the Israeli war in 2006. Turnus concluded her remarks saying NBC News is bigger than this moment. And Steve Burke says Williams deserves a second chance, and we are rooting for him. Brian Williams was informed of the decision late today. Megyn.
Trace, thank you. This is, by all accounts, a good person, and as it turns out, a flawed one. Who among us isn't? Journalists are not expected to be perfect, but we are expected to be honest in our reporting, to adhere to the facts of what we saw, what we heard, and what we know, to not embellish for personal aggrandizement or for purposes of entertainment. As NBC boss Steve Burke said, Brian's actions are, quote, inexcusable. Quote, he jeopardized the trust of millions of Americans. Can he recover from this blow to his credibility? From the people's new skepticism about the news he delivers? Only time will tell. But over the next 6 months, one thing is certain. He will not be forgiven. He will not survive professionally unless he offers some kind of explanation, a full-throated mea culpa. Americans love to tear down the mighty, but they also believe in second chances. They are, in most cases, forgiving and willing to try to trust again. What's owed now is a sincere apology, one that attempts to explain his behavior. The road back for Brian Williams may be painful and humiliating, but this job, which some of us are so privileged to hold, is worth fighting for. And my bet is he will. Joining us now with more, Brit Hume, our Fox News senior political analyst. That's my take on it, Brit. What's yours?
Well, I would first say, Megyn, that I very much regret that this happened. Brian is a friend of mine, someone I've always liked and admired. We were White House correspondents together back in the Clinton years for a couple of years, and I found him to be great company, great fun, a good friend, hilariously funny. I never detected, Megyn, in his work as a journalist there, any tendency to embellish or exaggerate or not tell the truth. He seemed to me a straight shooter and a fine television news anchor. So I was surprised by these developments and saddened by them. And I, like you, hope that somehow he can overcome this.
You know, when I was thinking about what he needs to do to get back to where he was, I was asking myself, well, will the American public forgive him? And I think they will forgive him if he comes out and really offers a full-throated mea culpa. But then it occurred to me it's not about forgiveness, really. It's about whether he can ever reestablish that trust with the audience, that lead them to get them to believe what he is telling them.
Well, that's obviously true, Megyn, and of course, as the face of NBC News, it's he is the leading news anchor in terms of news ratings in the country, evening news anchor, and once exposed as someone who is repeatedly told these tall tales, that's a hard thing to come back from. I mean, I hope he can do it, but it's a little hard for me to see how he can do that. Now, I've talked to a number of people down here in Florida, where I am now, who watched Brian Williams and liked him very much. And obviously, millions did. He was number one. And I was surprised at how many of them said they could never trust him again. And a lot of them said that they liked him, but they were very disappointed. So obviously, the people at NBC looking at this, with him off the air, and this having happened, I suspect that what they were fervently hoping was that this story would somehow go away, that it would subside. That was not happening. Mm-hmm. More incidents were being alleged in which he told stories. The commentary, devastating, satirical photographs of him, the manipulated photos that showed him in all these historical events. I mean, just stuff that in a very rough way was kind of funny, but if you're a friend of Brian, as I was, it made you wince. Mm-hmm. And this was not going away. And I think they took this action to try to stop the hemorrhaging. And I believe that the head of NBC Universal meant it when he said that they're rooting for Brian, because Brian means a lot to them. They got a lot invested in him.
Right. I'm sure, and they know him as a man.
I guess,
they know him as a man, and by all accounts, this is not a jerk. It's not like people came out of the woodwork saying, "Oh, no, he's a jerk. Like let's get rid of it." People came out and said, "I really like." They say what you said. I really like him. I'm shocked by this. I feel sad to see this happening. And yet the reality of it is, Brit, it is happening. NBC News has conducted its own investigation, and it's now all there, black and white, that it was wrong. It was completely inappropriate, that he misrepresented events, and they have concerns about other comments he made while talking about other experiences in the field. I mean, it was not a single event.
It crossed a line. Well, that's true, and I think it probably, it really kind of crosses a line when you do what he did on the NBC nightly news. I mean, it is one thing to go on, entertainment programs and tell barroom stories and, war stories and exaggerate them. I'm not saying it's acceptable. I'm just saying but once you cross over into saying something from your position as anchor, that's a tall tale. That's hard to recover from, mm-hmm. and that's pretty serious.
Why would he do this? What's your guess? I mean, not even just knowing him, Brit, but as somebody with so much experience in journalism, what would make you try to build yourself up so falsely?
I can't imagine, and I won't try, Megyn. I mean, anything I said about his possible motivations for telling these stories would be speculation on my part, and just would add, in a minor way perhaps, to his woes, and I'm not eager to add to his woes tonight.
What of NBC in all of this? Because, some of the questions I've heard here have included, if he was telling the truth about these experiences, where are his colleagues? Where's the photographer? Where's the producer that were with him, undoubtedly, on his trip to Iraq, when he was covering Hurricane Katrina, when he was up watching the Katyusha rockets fly, allegedly beneath his chopper? You and I know, you don't go out there by yourself. He wouldn't have been by himself when those things happened. It wouldn't have been just the military. His NBC News colleagues either experienced these things along with him or have known for years that he has not been telling the truth.
Well, I can't account for their behavior either, Megyn. On the other hand, you can understand how somebody who works with Brian Williams and likes him as much as I do, for example, wouldn't want to rat him out.
Right.
And particularly when, at least except in one instance that we know of, he wasn't telling these stories on the NBC Nightly News. He was telling them in other venues. They may not even have seen them. I don't know. I mean, look, I'm not inside NBC News. I don't know what goes on there. That's a whole world unto itself, as you know, all networks are. And it's impossible for me to know what prevented anybody from coming forward, or even going to him and say, Brian, you really got to be careful about telling these tall tales, because, you could get yourself in a lot of hot water. I don't know.
And there's still a question about whether that happened. When they did this internal investigation, perhaps those employees were spoken to and told the truth as they remembered it, and perhaps that's what's led to these conclusions. We don't know.
That's all seems to me,
Before I
Megan,
go,
that's all
Brit, let me
kind of
ask
water
you,
under the bridge now.
because I got Howie Kurtz and Bernie Goldberg coming up, but I want to ask you before I let you go, do you think he can survive this? Do you think he'll be back in the air in 6 months?
I don't know. I certainly hope so. I really like the guy, and I feel terrible for him tonight.
Yeah. I think you speak for a lot of us. Brit, good to see you.
Thank you.
Up next, Fox's Howie Kurtz and Bernie Goldberg are here, and they will weigh in on whether they believe we will see Brian Williams back on the air in 6 months. Plus, I will ask them why the media seems so determined to cover this story so aggressively and not so much some very public falsehoods told by some very well-known politicians. Plus, we are following breaking news tonight regarding the death of an American woman at the hands of ISIS, and reports the terror group wanted a prisoner swap for her. In moments, Senator Marco Rubio reacts. And White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest asked to clarify President Obama's recent remark that a gunman just, quote, randomly picked a kosher deli as a target during the Paris terror attacks. His bizarre defense and a fair and balanced debate coming up.
The individuals who were killed in that terrible, tragic incident were killed not because of who they were, but because of where they randomly happened to be.
They weren't killed because they were in a Jewish deli, though? They were in a kosher
John,
deli?
These individuals were not targeted by name. This is the point.
Not by name, but by religion, were they not?